You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to Dodge Movie Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite films, Only Angels Have Wings. I had never heard of this movie prior to film school, and then when I saw it and had to write a pretty intense, deep paper on it, I ended up dissecting it in a way and fell in love with this movie. Came home and told Mike about it and made him watch it again. Well, I think I probably had to watch it for my paper, and so I made him watch it with me, and it kind of featured prominently in our relationship, which was kind of fun. So it's a 1939 Howard Hawks film starring Cary Grant, Jean Arthur, Rita Hayworth, Richard Bartholomew's. I thought it was Bartholomew, but it's not.
No, there's an S at the end.
Yeah. And Thomas Mitchell. It's set in Barranca, Lima, Peru, which you find out because...
Calling Barranca.
Once again, talking about that transatlantic accent. It is also a Columbia Pictures movie, just like It Happened One Night. And it was filmed on the Warner Brothers Ranch in Burbank, North Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. The writer was Jules Furthman, and Howard Hawks got the story from, I think, an article. Well, anyway, the story was called Plane from Barranca. So it was nominated for Best Effects, an Academy Award for Best Effects. The synopsis is, at a remote South American trading port, the manager of an air freight company is forced to risk his pilots' lives in order to win an important contract, as a traveling American showgirl stops in town. And the tagline for this film is 1939's greatest screen adventure.
Well, humility was the order of the day.
So Mike, kick us off. What's the pickup line for Only Angels Have Wings?
Heave the starboard line.
That sounds like boat language, not plane language.
And they start out on this boat, and I have to make a note under sets that they built a ship on a soundstage.
Oh, wow.
If you look at that opening scene where the steamer comes into the dock, that's on a soundstage. So that means they built this 30-foot tall, I presume it wasn't steel, it was wood made to look like it, but it was a gigantic prop.
So you're talking about like the ship. Could that have been forced perspective though? Like, did they only build part of the bow and then hit it with, because there's like a market, like they're on the dock.
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't build the entire ship.
Oh, okay. Well, it sounded like you thought that.
Very tall structure. It wasn't just a little bit like the gangplank. It was a giant bow. It was substantial.
Yes. No, mad props to the set designers of those eras, of what magic they were able to create.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the acting of Cary Grant and Jean Arthur? I had never heard of Jean Arthur before this movie.
It's interesting that you said that, because when I looked at her IMDb oeuvre, there is a show in the 60s called The Jean Arthur Show, and that name sounds familiar, so I may have seen reruns of that. But she looks like she could be related to an actress whose name was Georgette something or other. She was a blonde, curly hair, and had kind of a voice. So she felt vaguely familiar to me, but I don't know that I'd seen any of her work, even though she is very prolific. I thought she did a fantastic job in this one. Very accessible, very approachable. And I have to say, Rita Hayworth was kind of stiff. I really didn't get the sexy femme fatale that I think the character was supposed to have. And I'd mentioned this before. I felt like she looked very thin. It was noticeable because Rita Hayworth was known for being a sex symbol, right?
Yeah, more voluptuous.
Yeah. And then as far as Cary Grant went, I thought his acting was fine. The character, I didn't quite understand, though, why he was so kind of angry all the time. I know he was under pressure to get this contract to keep Dutchie and his airline afloat, but he just seemed mad at all of his employees.
Well, to me, it very much seemed like he was that stereotypical kind of military guy. which I would think that it's conceivable that he would have been in the military and then this is the job that he would have had after that. And he just seemed like that very, saying this, but stereotypical man who has to harden his heart because, and he kind of explained it, because soon into the film, one of the pilots dies. And he kind of, I'm going to look in my writing here to see if I had a line. Oh, I just wrote that Geoff Carter is very stoic and very matter of fact. And I thought he even explained to her, like, I can't allow myself to get attached to these guys because they kind of, this happens all the time. They're up in the Andes Mountains where it's very foggy. And so in trying to get the planes in and out, it does seem pretty harrowing. They've got like 2 lookout guys. And so I got the sense between that. And then we learned later that Rita Hayworth kind of broke his heart. And so I think it's just somebody who has tried to shell off his heart so he doesn't, hurt, because he's the life he's living has a lot of pain.
Yeah, Jean Arthur's character, I think Bonnie is her name, says, somebody must have given you an awful beating.
Yeah.
I guess so. I mean, from a writing perspective, I must also say that I don't know if the weather coming in and out that quickly is strictly accurate. That seemed like a really quick turnaround.
Well, up in the Andes Mountains.
Again, I'm not a meteorologist, so I can't say for sure, but it seemed like it would take a lot of time to move fog in or out, not just a few seconds, right? It almost felt like just over the course of a few minutes, things had changed. However, I give the writers credit because they did get the service ceiling correct for the Ford Trimotor. So that was good.
You're jumping ahead to the driving review or the flying review?
Well, maybe, but I have to say, good research, guys.
But I felt like you could definitely tell that he cared about his guys, like in his own way.
Yes.
Like especially, I think he cared about Dutchie, but the kid.
Mm-hmm, kid.
Which I would take, the kid is kind of like his best friend.
Right. And there's a scene where Bonnie says to Kid, well, do you say you love him? Yes, I do. And well, what do you say when you can't come back? And well, I'm torn up. Well, so am I, kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that's probably realistic, that if a person has a job where every time they go up, they could die.
Yeah.
It would be emotionally harrowing. I don't know that we necessarily, as an audience, respond because we are in much better economic straits where we wouldn't take a job that had a significant chance of dying. And these people, they needed it, right? We talked about this. This is post-depression. And these flyboys, they had been trained by the military during World War I, presumably, but that wasn't a lucrative career. That's the only skill they had. So they had to take these jobs. Right.
Well, and I think there's just different personality types, and there are people that it's kind of like, I want the dangerous job. I'm going to carry out the dangerous job. I'm going to, take it as a badge of honor that I'm going to be because you could tell all of the pilots were very proud. Like, I thought it was very interesting. The kid's eyes are going and dangerous, but Dutchie told him where Geoff, which I want to just mention right here, it's spelled like our wonderful, fabulous editor, Geoff, Geoff, Geoff Carter. Dutchie told the kid where Geoff hid the eye test. And so he takes him into the office and he gives him an eye test, but then Geoff pulls out a second eye test. And so you think, oh, here we go. He's not going to know this one. But then he does. And then he confesses that, well, I knew where you hid the new ones and I memorized that one too.
Fun fact, I knew a guy in high school who did that gag at the Department of Motor Vehicles because he didn't want to admit that he needed glasses.
Oh, geez.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. And then I liked, jumping ahead to kind of cinematography, and we can talk more about writing if you want, but I loved the scene where there's this really cool primitive depth perception. It's this long box with these,
right,
with like a string and these 2, I guess, things that stick up. And he asks the kid to line them up so that they're even. And so we see it from the kid's point of view and they look like they're even. And then it cut to more of an upper so that we can see down into the box and see that they're not even at all. And so it's like, oh, yeah, his eyes are going. Look at how uneven he thinks, or that he missees it.
Yeah, I will also say, I don't know if this necessarily is strictly cinematography, but they did do some model work with small model planes.
Yeah.
And it's, to our modern eye, obvious, but it's really quite good relative to what they had.
I agree.
And then, though, they have aerial footage of this Curtiss Wright 6B that is obviously in flight, and they show it land on top of this mesa at altitude.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a little disconcerting because it's a short runway, kind of, and they get near the edge and he makes a turn, that's fine. But watching it take off was actually terrifying to me because the plane can't get enough airspeed. So it basically just drives over the side of the mesa. It falls. It doesn't fly. It's falling with style.
Right.
And then uses gravity to pick up enough airspeed to survive. They really did that.
Yeah.
That is an actual plane with human beings on board that just goes over the side of that cliff. It was terrifying.
Did I send you that clip or did you look it up?
If you send it to me, I haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, there's a fun clip. I'll link it in the show notes. And it's two guys talking about how they did that. And they found footage, like extra footage that wasn't in the film that shows how many times they did it and stuff. It's really kind of cool.
So I think the bush pilots that do that kind of thing for real, probably that's not particularly abnormal for them.
Right.
But those guys, wow, giant cojones.
Yeah. That's a fun video too, because they talk about, I think I told you this earlier today, they talk about the camera that was used on those airplanes, and it's really fun. Kind of a behind the scenes kind of cool thing.
Going back to just pure cinematography, it seems like whenever Jean Arthur is on scene, she's incredibly well lit. But one of my favorites, which was kind of comic, was the first time we see her as she's about to disembark the ship. She is very well lit, and the guy standing 10 inches beside her is almost completely in shadow.
Right.
So it looks exactly like there's a spotlight focused on her.
Yeah. And I love her character.
Oh, yeah.
Because
tons of fun.
It's kind of funny because she's a showgirl, right? That's her occupation, I believe.
Well, that's what the synopsis said. I didn't get that from the dialogue.
I thought
it was brought up, but I didn't get a yes.
Yeah. And then there's a great scene like at the piano and they're all singing, the peanut vendor, and
also a lot of singing in this film. Apparently in the 30s, there was a lot of spontaneous singing.
Right. You would have loved it.
I know. It'd have been great.
There's a great scene where she meets two flyboys and they talk about having a steak dinner. And I didn't really feel like it was overtly like a way to date, but I guess maybe kind of. It was just really sweet how it was very platonic.
Yes, this is a thing that I think we have lost to our detriment, is these guys were hanging out with a bunch of other dudes in this dangerous profession, and they just wanted to enjoy the company of a woman. So it wasn't like, oh, if you eat the steak that I'm buying you, you have to have sex with me. It was just, we like the company of dames.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, to just say, you're a lady, there are differences, we enjoy them, would you please have a meal with us? That would be fun.
Tell me more, Grandpa Dodge.
Yeah, exactly. You're lucky you're so far away I can't grab your forearm to hold you in place while I tell you these things. But
no, I think you're right. It was just very sweet. And like Joe, one of the flyboys, goes up and she instantly is super concerned. You know, this is somebody she literally just met maybe 10 minutes ago. He's headed off to the sky and she's super concerned that he's going to come back. And unfortunately he doesn't.
Right.
And she's distraught, which you would be if you know, somebody you kind of, I mean, just witnessing someone's death, it would be terrifying. It would be awful. But she clearly has more eyes for
Geoff.
Geoff, yes. Thank you, Geoff Carter. And wants to get to know him a little bit better. And so she changes her plans to stay a little bit longer. And he very much kind of has her at arm's length. He is not interested at all in getting to know her better.
Well, I like her moxie.
Yes.
And there's a point where he comes into his room and he goes to open the curtain to the bathroom area and she's in there taking a bath, presumably.
Mhm.
Although we all know that the actress is just standing behind the curtain to deliver her lines.
Right.
And he says something to the effect of, what are you doing here? And she's like, well, I was going to take a bath and yours has the nicest tub. And I just liked the way that character was in her delivery. She wasn't entitled, but it was just kind of, like I said, moxie.
Mhm.
You're like, oh yeah, you're not using it. It's a nice tub. I'm going to use it.
Mhm. I also like the scene when Rita Hayworth comes on scene and they're talking. And at one point, it's almost like he gets kind of an inkling and he walks over to the door and opens it and she just about falls in because she's eavesdropping.
Great sight gag or like physical comedy.
Yeah, it was really funny. And then, of course, the two ladies are kind of like, maybe I should leave you alone. Well, maybe I should leave you two alone. They're kind of tussling over him a little bit.
Right. And there's the hot coffee gag where he keeps burning his hand on on the hot coffee. And so there was some, I thought, physical comedy in this.
Yeah.
Right. And a couple of numbers, it seemed like it both started and stopped. Like at the beginning and the end, they had this local guy who wasn't credited playing guitar and singing kind of a melancholy song.
Right. And he says this line more than once when she asks him things. And I think he says it when she says, somebody beat you up. He says, I won't ask anyone to do anything. And it's that's part of kind of his stoicism. He wants someone to be there because they want to be there. He doesn't want to ask you to be there and then have you say yes. He wants it to be your idea. I think the Flyboys as well as the dames.
Yes, there's a line where she says, Geoff, you're a hard man, much too hard. And I think we see that when somebody doesn't make it and they basically pretend they never existed.
Yeah.
And there's this recurring bit of he gets their personal effects and you can kind of go through them and pick out what you want. And there's a point where one of the characters, I think it was Sparks, not Kid. By the way, they all have nicknames.
Yeah.
Apparently back then you didn't get paid well, but you got a nickname.
Right.
Says, oh, I don't need anything to remember them by, the person who didn't make it.
Right.
And that's kind of, he has set up, like you said, this armor. And I guess that would actually, if he was a veteran of aerial combat, that would be something he would have had to do when he, lost people that were in his unit. So maybe that makes a degree of sense. But he was very hard. He yells at people a lot. And I remember he, at least verbally, we don't know if he followed through on it, fired a guy for having concern about taking a super dangerous mission.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the flip side is he then assigns it to the guy that everybody hates because he bailed out of a plane in the past and somebody else didn't make it. So that's like a black mark against him forever, which I think is interesting because in the trivia they said that, I think it was the director, had encountered that exact situation where there was a pilot that no one else would fly with because he had bailed out and somebody else had died.
Oh, wow. He's yellow.
Yeah, he's a coward. Which makes it all the more ironic that he ends up with Geoff's ex.
Right, exactly. So the one thing that I did not understand, it's near the end of the movie, maybe like 20 minutes to go, and Geoff is going to go flying.
Yeah.
And she says no, because she loves Geoff and she doesn't want anything to happen to Geoff. Mm-hmm. So she does what every woman would do when you fear for someone's danger or, their life.
She slaps him?
No, she pulls a gun on him.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought, wait, what? And then because, of course, dames don't know how to handle firearms, when she sets it down on the table, it accidentally goes off and shoots Geoff in the shoulder.
I'm going to have to disagree with your police work there, Lou. I actually wanted to note that for excellent firearms realism, because she doesn't set it down, she throws it down.
Oh, and maybe now we're getting a little too...
She throws it onto the table.
And her finger may have been in the trigger.
No, because at that era, the hammer was free swinging. So if there was enough of an impact, it could have jostled the hammer back and the hammer spring would pull it forward and detonate. If it was already cocked back, is there a way for it to... Yes, it could have. That's actually why... Unfortunately, topical. You don't drop firearms, you set them down. Yeah. Yeah, no, she had not had her Eddie the Eagle safety training. Yeah.
And she should not have picked up that gun because she didn't know what she was doing. And I just thought, just implore him with your words and maybe your womanly woes, but let's not pull a firearm on people we care about.
However, she kind of got what she wanted because since he was injured, he was unable to.
Fly.
So maybe, she...
But I remember the first time I saw it, I was just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So the reason that this film is so special to us is it's cute because I think the kid... Does the kid have the coin or does he have the coin? And he tricks the kid.
No, the kid has the coin.
So
and
the
it
kid...
turns out he's been using this coin to get free drinks and avoid doing the dishes and whatever else for a year now.
Because it's it has a heads on two sides.
So he says, like, heads, he gets his way, tails, he has to do what you want. And coincidentally, heads is always coming
always
up.
the thing that comes up. And so she wants him to stay, but because he doesn't ever ask anyone anything, because she's like, she says, tell me to stay. And that's when he says, I never ask anyone to do anything. Mm-hmm. And she's angry because she wants to hear him say, I want you to stay. I care about you and I want you to stay.
I don't want you to do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes.
And so he pulls out the coin. And so the audience knows what this means, but she doesn't.
She doesn't yet.
And he says, heads I stay, tails I go.
Right.
Or you go or something.
Something like that.
And so he flips it and he hands it to her. And so he knows he's just told her, I'm staying.
And she's like, I don't want to just be like a random chance.
Right. She's very angry at this.
Right.
And so he goes off and he gets in the plane. And then she looks down at the coin and realizes it's two heads. And then
that was his way of saying, I want you to stay.
So in our relationship, nobody was really leaving, but just, marriage is hard.
I know of.
And so it was very sweet because Mike went on eBay.
No, I had to find, so spoiler alert, kids, you can purchase silver dollars that have a head on both sides. It's probably not cool according to the Department of the Treasury because I think they actually have to modify them, but it's possible that this was a boo-boo that they got from the Department of Treasury. Yeah, so it was not eBay. It was some other numismatic site of some sort.
So he bought a two-headed coin and he gave it to me as an affirmation of his loyalty and said, heads I stay. And so I will post a picture because I since bought the movie poster and I framed it with the coin there. And so it's very sweet. So that's why I love this movie. Another reason why I love this movie, I should say. So to get us out of the sweet sappiness that I just plunged us into, I'm at the costuming section of our podcast that we rarely get to, but I felt like Dutchie's costume made him look like Smee from...
Thank you. I made that note as well.
Peter Pan.
Immediately he waxed on screen with that horizontally striped shirt. And I was like, is this Smee or what? And I know it is a different era, but I also wondered when we first are introduced to the character of Bat, who is just like flown to the middle of nowhere, South America.
Barranca.
Calling Barranca. He's wearing a tie. It seemed a little overdressed for that activity.
Yeah. Although the pilots now, they wear a full suit, a full uniform.
The ones who fly out of PDX or whatever, they probably wear the fake tie. They may not wear an undershirt thanks to Clark
Gable, right? Yeah. Exactly.
I should actually ask. I know a guy who used to fly for Life Flight, so I'm curious if they made them wear the fake military style uniform.
Yeah. So how about head trauma? There was some shoulder trauma how about head trauma?
There is. Bonnie slaps Geoff for eating Joe's steak because Joe had just died, but he'd already put in the order for the steak, so you can't let that go to waste. Don't let a good steak
go to waste.
Yeah.
And you eat it in honor of Joe.
Right. It's not like Joe had started eating it.
Right.
Also, she hits her own head as part of her physical comedy after being discovered eavesdropping. And then, I think this qualifies, Geoff punches Kid to subdue him.
Yes, that qualifies for head trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. Do we get a gratifying kiss from...
Smoochy, smoochy, smoochy! I believe we have
Geoff
several
and
kisses.
Bonnie.
At 40 minutes in, Geoff kisses Bonnie right before he's about to fly. At 1 hour, 30 minutes, 34 seconds, he picks her up because she's got a twisted ankle, he thinks. He kisses her then too. And then at 1:59:40, when he says goodbye to Bonnie, he kisses her. Now, I have to say that first kiss also earned an entry in the couldn't be made today section because he grabs her and kisses her without consent of any sort, not even implied.
They hadn't even known each other that long.
Yeah, they weren't flirting. There was absolutely no real reason why he should think that it was okay to grab her and kiss her at that point.
Not cool, Geoff.
Wasn't cool. See, he was angry. He really needs to take it down.
Maybe the love of a woman, a showgirl, will be redemption for Geoff.
Well, it was, but keep your hands and lips to yourself at first, buddy.
He's evolving, though. He's evolving.
Learning, growing.
Yeah. How about a driving review, or is it a flying review in this case?
This is all flying. We don't really see any driving, although there is what appears to be a Model T on tracks in one of the opening scenes. And you had said, is that actually some dolly tracks? And they just threw something on it.
Well, I've never seen a car.
No.
I mean, I've seen like that, that train thing that people stand on and it's like a teeter-totter and that's how they make it move. But I've never seen like a car that is made for, small train tracks, because they weren't standard train tracks. It was like a Disney ride. Yeah,
I think they used to have cars and now they have trucks that have train wheels instead of regular wheels. But I'd never seen that before, and that didn't kind of make much sense. But it was there. It was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So, fun fact, the first aircraft we see is a Hamilton H-47. And apparently that aircraft still exists. It's in a museum in Alaska, the Alaska Aircraft Museum.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, good for them. I want to say probably the worst part about this is how much drinking happened before flying.
Oh my gosh.
So kids do not drink and fly. And dousing yourself with cold water does not affect blood alcohol level.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't even like they didn't mention it. Basically, they acknowledged it because Geoff walked over to the sink and took 2 pitchers of ice cold water, poured them over the back of his neck, and was, that was an acceptable way to
ready to go
to sober up.
Yeah, and basically when they weren't flying, they were drinking in the bar.
Yes.
So they were all soused, and so in some sense, it's no surprise that there were so many plane crashes in this film because they were drunk all the time.
Maybe Dutchie was watering down the beer. Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope that.
Let's hope. There's also a little bit where I guess this qualifies as an inaccuracy. One of the guys is coming in and he looks like he's going to go long, right? He brought too much speed, or he had too much altitude. He's going to go long, and he's maybe 50 feet above the runway. This is done with a model, so it's hard to guess exactly. And they tell him to bail out, which is not actually your best move, because at that point your parachute doesn't have enough room to deploy and slow you down. If he jumped out of the plane there, he would guaranteed die. Not the best. But so as far as the flying goes, the models actually did a pretty good job of looking like they were flying. And as I mentioned, the Curtiss Wright 6B that lands and then takes off on that mesa, amazing flying from that individual. Good job. And I'm pretty sure that person was not drunk.
Drunk, not drunk.
Was Rip Torn in this film?
Good callback. Call forward?
Yeah, I guess. And credit to any of our listeners that get that reference.
Right. All right, should we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
Okay, this film was made in 1939. Like I said at the top of the show, it was 2 hours long. It also was part of the ratings board, so it passed. It's considered an adventure drama romance. We paused it once to talk about lighting. Shocking. I could not find a budget for this film. I do not know how much it cost to make, but I know it made $1 million and was considered a success. So, and one little note, this movie and a couple others that we reviewed this month were actually made later into radio plays. And so that probably extended the profitability of these stories as well, which is kind of interesting at the time that they were doing that. And it's interesting because right now, a lot of podcasts are being made into movies. So isn't it funny how we are reversing kind of history?
I was just thinking, is it possible to get James and Katie back to do a radio version of Second Story?
I'm sure there is. Ooh, and I could go have a field day with elevator sounds.
And if so, do you think they do the transatlantic accent?
Let's try it. It's a variant.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Lastly, this scored a 7.7 on IMDb out of 10. 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience felt that it was great at 82%. So this is another, I'm not alone in loving this movie. Other people agree.
It's a good movie. It's also a little longer than I would have expected for a film of this era and this subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's see. Join us next week, when we kick off our month of behind the scenes movies. We call it BTS, behind the scenes. We're talking about movies about movies.
One of my favorite categories.
I know. This is a fun one. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. We're going to kick it off with Get Shorty. We had originally planned another movie, but I couldn't find the movie that we had picked. And it's going to be really fun because we have a lot to talk about the recent TV show Get Shorty. So
I'll be honest, I think there was a copy-paste error there because the film that you mentioned, I think I said to you, but it wasn't even remotely in this category. So.
Right. So for the two people that requested the PDF of all the movies for this year, I'm telling you right now, the first movie in the month of April is wrong. It's going to be Get Shorty instead. And for the rest of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, you'll listen to Get Shorty next week.
That's right.
Okay. All right, everybody. Have a great day and never forget.
Dodges never stop and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.